It's going to be one of those days.
Armageddon's on the way.
This is the United States of America, for God's sake.
Yes, we're going to start with a series of Joes. Let me start it off with Joe Rogan. You know Joe Rogan, Basil? Have you heard of this guy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Bald guy, buff guy, tattoo guy, real big podcaster. He had done an interview. He's done many interviews, obviously, but he was doing a show. He was talking about AI and robots and all kinds of stuff recently. And I just found a really fun little ISO of him screaming MK Ultra.
MK Ultra! MK Ultra!
Somebody can make a jingle out of it. I think that's a great little thing for jingle makers out there. But also, you know, you and I, Basil, we've been having conversations like the one Joe Rogan is having now with robots and AI and stuff. We've been having it for about 10 years. And I noticed a sort of part of the conversation where Joe, I think, either tapped into our stream of thinking or maybe more. And here it is. Here's Joe talking about enhanced legs.
If they had fake legs that worked way better than real legs, and you could literally like jump over fences and run 50 miles an hour, wouldn't you get them?
I don't
go, Ryan, it's not that big a surgery.
If I was 20,
it's not that big a surgery, bro. It's no big deal. They just cut your legs off.
Such an awesome show, bro.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it definitely rung a bell with me. And it's because back in June of 2015, we published episode number 95 of Canary Cry Radio. You're listening to Canary Cry NewsTalk, different show. It was titled Christian Transhumanism with Reverend Dr. Bennick. And in this conversation, we spoke to a reverend who believes in kind of a pro-transhuman thing. He started the Christian Transhumanism Association. And there's a part of the discussion here that I wanted to play because I don't know, Basil, if you remember this, but here it is.
When it comes to exactly what you're saying, the image of God, when we are already made in the image of God, how far is too far and what steps outside the boundaries of that? And what are the boundaries of that? And I'm really not trying to build a straw man here, but I want to ask the legitimate question. What if I want kangaroo legs, like actual hairy kangaroo legs and a tail? You personally, if you were in charge of the theological debate, if Basil can have kangaroo legs, give it to me straight.
Well, if I was in charge, what I would do is I would go and get a bunch of Christians and I would sit and we'd pray about it. And we'd say, what are the ethical ramifications? See, I don't think I should. This is part of my issue with post-transhumanism folks is I don't think we should be allowed to do this stuff in isolation. You know, what are your reasons for wanting kangaroo legs?
I'm really trying to get into the Olympics and a little chimera action with.
So here's a good thing. And Zoltan Isvan, who I disagree with all the time on stuff, like he's talked about, eventually there will be transhumanist Olympics.
So there you go. Back in 2015.
Here we go. It's a classic.
Yeah.
The kangaroo legs argument will go down in the history of transhumanism discussion.
I think it's a better presentation of that argument or that thought in 2015 than Joe Rogan did with his chop off leg joke.
Well, it is interesting how the conversations about transhumanism they're everywhere now.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it was a pretty obscure thing to talk about. It seems so far away. Now it just isn't so far away. And the public conversation is everywhere. Now, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. Joe was talking about robot legs,
yep.
which we have talked about robot legs as well. But, it's nice to see a mainstream conversation regarding transhumanism. What is too far? Our conversation with Dr. Christopher Bennett was in the context of Christianity. How should Christians be approaching the idea of transhumanism? And, it's generally Joe Rogan, living in a society that is based on at least Judeo-Christian morals, is asking similar questions. So I gotta give him some credit for not being full on, pro-transhumanism. But yes, the transhumanist leg replacement conversation. He's a little bit late to the game, guys.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple more Joe references here.
I wrote the bill. Come on, man.
And this is from MSNBC, Morning Joe. Of course, the show.
By the way, real quick, so sorry. What is the episode number for the Dr. Christopher Bennett
I believe it was
episode?
095.
95. Yeah. So go to your podcast player or whatever, search Canary Cry Radio, a different show. This is Canary Cry NewsTalk, Canary Cry Radio, episode 95. And you can hear that conversation from back in 2015. I believe that was the same year that we were talking about things like Flat Earth and Q.
Watershed
simpler
year.
Times. Simpler times.
I know, simpler times. But maybe preparing ourselves for such times as these. This is Morning Joe, MSNBC, talking about Joe Biden. And you will hear Morning Joe there set up the question, but the person answering is former CIA Mark Polymeropoulos. Joe talking about Joe Biden's role in Ukraine.
As a CIA guy, you had to make assessments. I'm going to ask you to go back and this is going to be a pretty obvious assessment about what would have happened. What would have happened if Donald Trump had been elected president? What would have happened to Ukraine? You wrote about this in the Washington Times.
So it's pretty extraordinary because if Donald Trump had actually won the election, think about Ukraine would be part of Russia. The NATO alliance would have been shattered. So elections really do matter. And so I think, with Biden's trip to Europe, he is welcomed as not only frankly, the savior of Ukraine, but also the savior of Europe as a whole. And Joe, watching that speech yesterday, all I could think of was someone that I think both of us admire. That's Ronald Reagan. Right. That was a Reagan-esque speech for the ages. And so I think this is really going to define Biden's legacy.
Savior of Ukraine, savior of Europe in general.
Wow, that is, man, these guys are carrying water for Biden. What a statement. The savior of Europe, which of course, makes him the savior of the West, which at least in this current world order means he's the savior of the world.
I thought the liberals didn't want the white savior. They have an old white savior.
Well, he's saving white people. Apparently, white people are allowed to save white people. But yeah.
Well, this Reagan-esque speech here, I have some clips, a little mesh up of clips from the speech in Poland. I just thought that everyone was talking about, and certainly the CIA guy was referencing. So here it is.
And let there be no doubt, the commitment of the United States to our NATO alliance and Article 5 is rock solid.
First of all, I know we've seen this before, but he's standing on kind of a podium, but it's kind of, I don't know how to explain it. It's like a walkway stage, so it's lifted up higher, but then there's these glass. Have you seen a drum cage at a church?
Yeah.
It's like that around Joe.
Yeah. It's like bulletproof glass.
I think you cut out.
Same thing that Trump had on the January 6th speech he gave. He had those big glass panels in front of him. I think it's just they must be worried about maybe because he's so close to Russia that some Russian assassin or something.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that it brings to mind is that a lot of the 3D stage performances has glass panels to kind of provide the 3D image. So
hologram stuff.
Yeah, holograms. Yeah. So it might not be long before just get a body
funny.
double to do the on-off part. But anyway, all right, can I continue here?
And every member of NATO knows it. And Russia knows it as well. An attack against one is attack against all. It's a sacred oath.
Sacred oath.
Sacred oath to defend every inch of NATO territory. He thought NATO would fracture and divide. Instead, NATO is more united and more unified than ever before.
Just real quick, wanted to point out that, yes, NATO is more unified, but it's because the West is more fractured from China and Russia. And so,
yeah, I mean,
it's in the context of this breaking apart.
Well, in the context of this, it's the expansion of NATO. It's the unifying of NATO, the moving of NATO to the east that provoked this whole thing in the first place. Yeah. So, yeah, great job.
You guys did it. So, yeah, you're right. You are unified. But, okay, anyway.
Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia. Never. We're seeing again today what the people of Poland and the people across Europe saw for decades. Appetites of the autocrat cannot be appeased. They must be opposed. Autocrats only understand one word: no, no, no.
Reagan-esque. There it is.